My boyfriend and I recently decided that we wanted to take the new tent that we bought on its first trip. The tent was one that hooks up to your car to provide more storage space, and we were excited to try it out. We had planned a kayaking trip the next day at a kayak rental shop. It was supposed to be a nice, inexpensive, outdoorsy weekend getaway. Now, we tend to book things last minute, so all the state parks and professional campgrounds were full. This led us to a website that is essentially an Airbnb for campsites. The place we chose was a 100-acre property just about 20 minutes south of the kayak shop. Of all the sites in the area, it was described to have working bathrooms, showers, and it allowed for campfires. And all the sites were car accessible. It's important for a car-dependent tent. This site was also the most reviewed in the area with 3 5-star reviews. The area was very rural, so we didn't think much about the low number of reviews for any of the campsites. The renter was Mary, who only ever texted us updates but seemed sweet. We started our 2-hour drive a bit later than anticipated, which put us behind the 11 a.m. time that we had originally informed the host. But we tried to keep her updated with the new schedule. She just told us to let her know when we would arrive at the address and that she had sent us. We arrived at the address and are greeted with the barn from the pictures. It had string lights all over it and seemed fairly new, and just gave a nice feel to it. We sit in the car for a minute and struggle with cell service to text the host to let her know that we had arrived. 10 minutes after our text ends, a smutty man who appears to be in his 60s pulls up in an ATV. He lets us know that he's the father-in-law to Mary, and she's busy taking care of the seasonal harvest and sent him instead. He lets us know that we can take the car pretty much anywhere on the property, and offers to show us around in the ATV. My boyfriend, visibly uncomfortable, declines the offer and asks a few more questions about the woods and how far into them we're allowed to take the car. Anywhere, there are no designated campsites. We can go anywhere, and the ATV man even offers to help pull my car out if it gets stuck. We asked one final question about cell service, and he jokes that if we're from around here, we'll understand that reception works better on one side of the barn than the other. I am from around here and thought that it was funny, but once he said that, I realized he didn't have any ounce of an accent from here like he should. Eventually, he leaves and we begin exploring the property on foot. The barn is nice and maintained. It was fully lit in the middle of the day with the string lights decorating the interior too. It is insulated and it has a working kitchen. The only warning we got was to not drink the water. It seemed like a place that would host small 50-guest weddings. We walked past a shed out behind the barn to get the trails that ran through the woods. After going through a hike that my car would have never survived, we decided that it might be best just to camp by a small creek, and we chose a spot on the side opposite the barn. We were still within walking distance, but we used my car as a buffer to feel a bit more isolated. We choose our spot and then go into the main town to eat and walk around. And we message Mary about the fire policy, and she tells us that they will deliver a fire ring to the barn for us to take to camp. We arrive back at the barn about an hour and a half from nighttime. We drive by the barn and the lights have been turned off. We assumed that it was on a timer as to not waste energy or money. And we also noticed the fire ring has not yet been delivered. We start the grueling 30-minute setup in the sticky heat and reward ourselves with a sit in the air-conditioned car. We notice that it looks like it's about to rain, so my boyfriend and I pull out a card game and wait for it to pass in the car. It only lasted for about 10 minutes, but it's starting to be sunset. The tent held up nicely, so we felt okay leaving it for a second. Needing to use the bathroom, we start walking to the barn. As we cross the creek, we hear what sounds to be like someone in the shed and moving things around. A bit unsettling, but I tell my boyfriend that maybe they used equipment today, and it's just sitting there and making the cracking cool-off noise that it sometimes does. We get to the barn and the lights are still off, but the fire ring is there. We go in and check to make sure that the power is off, and it is not, just the lights outside. None of the light switches will work, so we assume that the power was cut. Again, maybe it's just on a timer, so no worries. We step out of the barn and get 10 feet away, and we hear a hum in the distance to the opposite side of the shed. The power to the barn is restored, and we change direction to use the bathroom. As soon as we step inside, the power cuts. I start to get a weird feeling, and I can tell that he has it too. I look at my boyfriend and say, maybe they're just watching us. I immediately follow it up with, no, that's a lot worse. We walk back outside and the lights turn on. My boyfriend says that we need to leave, and I have the same gut-wrenching primal fear. We put the ring back by the barn since we had moved it 10 feet, and the barn lights start flickering. We briskly walk back to the car. Being from Appalachia, I know better than to run. The 30-minute setup was torn down and packed up in 5 minutes, and we jump in the car and lock it. I managed to get my car going, and thanking God that the rain did not get my car stuck. We start toward the driveway, and just as we had made it to the road, my boyfriend looks back and sees a man standing by the shed watching us. As soon as my car pulls off onto the road, we get a text from Mary letting us know that the fire ring is out by the barn. She also informs us that we're welcome to stay in the barn if the rain had messed up our camping experience. We arrive at a nice hotel, willing to splurge for safety. At this point, it's 10 p.m. at the earliest, and a sweet older lady checks us in. Desperate for validation and just comfort from anyone, we tell her what had just happened to us at the campsite. She looks shocked. She asks if we had seen the news lately, which we both respond that we had not. The lady tells us that couples in the state have been going missing, and all of them had gone camping. 3 couples were truly missing, and one was recently found on the side of the freeway, slashed to near death. They are at the time of posting still recovering in the hospital. We couldn't find many articles about where in the state, but the look on the lady's face suggested that it was near us. We get to our room and text Mary back to tell her that we're not staying. "Thank you for staying with us," was all that we got back. We lock the door and I break down into tears. I will not forget that feeling that I got at the barn. The primal fight or flight feeling, and the feeling of being watched. I feel it in my throat just writing this. I never want to experience that again. In 2010, I was living in Quincy, Massachusetts with my husband, new baby, and a roommate. It was a Saturday, so I was taking a much-needed break from the baby and went to run errands and have some alone time. My first stop was to the local Radio Shack to get a phone accessory. After my purchase, I walked out of Radio Shack, deep in thought about my to-do list and enjoying being without my baby when a voice broke through my reverie. "Excuse me, miss, can you help me, please?" I blinked in confusion and looked over at the man who had addressed me. My first impression was Italian grandpa. Everything about him was beige, from his khaki slacks, brown cardigan, and tweed flat cap, to his sandy-colored mustache. Even the car that he stood next to, a boat-sized town car, was a faded champagne. I hesitated. As a big believer in the golden rule, I generally try to help people out whenever I can. But this time, something about the situation gave me pause. I stood there in the middle of the parking lot. "What do you need?" I asked. He smiled warmly. "There's something wrong with my car." He held up a key fob. "When I click my car key, my car door locks won't lock. It's very strange. Can you come over and take a look?" He gestured to his car and clicked the fob in demonstration. Still hesitating, I answered, "I don't know anything about cars, but we're right here at Radio Shack. Maybe they can help you." "No, No, he said. I think we can figure this out together. Come here and look. Again, I repeated that I don't think that I could help him. I could see that he was getting agitated, yet he continued to smile. He walked over to the back of his car and opened the trunk. But here's the strangest thing, he said. The doors won't lock, but the trunk will. He started waving at me eagerly. Come here and look at the trunk. I began to feel very confused. Part of me wanted to go over to help, yet greater instincts prevailed. I began to walk in the opposite direction to my car, repeating over and over again to the man, I can't help you, go into Radio Shack for help. As I walked away, I saw him throw up his arms in disgust, slam down the trunk, get in his car and drive away. I drove into my next errand feeling very unsettled, but as I tried to process the encounter, I began to have doubts about my reaction. Maybe he was just an old man who needed help. Did I do the right thing? When I returned home, I shared my encounter with my husband and roommate. I expected that they'd laugh and assure me that I was being overly paranoid. Instead, they looked at me with wide eyes. Health River, my husband said. The guy was trying to kidnap you. I didn't report this incident to the police, as I didn't have any useful information regarding a license plate number, and I didn't think a man asking for help with his car counted as harassment. I did always wonder what the man's true intentions were. On a lark, I decided to Google attempted kidnappings in Quincy, and hoped that my search would turn up empty and this was truly an innocent if awkward encounter. Imagine my dismay when this article pulled up. Quincy man accused of attempting to kidnap women 20 years old. I immediately recognized the perpetrator as the man from the Radio Shack parking lot. A follow-up article revealed that he actually lived in my old neighborhood. I often wonder if I was one of his first attempts at kidnapping, and what would have happened to me if I had gone over to look in his trunk. This is a true story, and it happened when I was about 5 or 6. When I was younger, my parents were always cops. About this time, however, my mother was a paralegal. That's someone that's just under an attorney, but they irritate people just as much, and my father was a police officer. I have a hard time remembering how long this took place. Being a child, it felt a lot longer than it actually was. We believed the man had followed us home from the grocery store, but my mom truly believes that she had to have pissed him off in some way in her profession. She had no idea who the man was and does not remember ever seeing or talking to him. We lived about 45 minutes to an hour away from town on a lake, so him finding our house could have never been a coincidence. Now, how my house was set up. We had a driveway getting to our garage the back way, and we had a driveway getting to our house the front way. In order to get back to front without going through the garage was to go around the entire yard on one side, or to go through the snake-infested weeds on the other, if that makes any sense. The front driveway had a door to the garage to get into the main door, or my sliding glass door to my bedroom. For my bedroom was a door to the living room. It's important for later. The back way had a door that came off onto a large porch in the driveway, connected to my aunt's driveway a few hundred yards. We walked to her house to play with my cousins about every day. So this all began with my sleeping in my room and slight tapping on my sliding glass door. The tapping grew louder until I woke up. Now I'm already a light sleeper, and being about 5 or 6, I was already paranoid about monsters and ghosts. I woke up to a man standing at the sliding glass door and tapping and looking in. I screamed, my parents came in, and he was gone by then. This started happening about every single night. It ended up turning into a daytime ritual as well. He had to have had a police scanner and knew when my dad was at work. No one had actually seen him to make a description, and I remember the police department was at our house about every single night. Response time wasn't very good, obviously, but down the road was my dad's cop buddy named Fred. And I'm pretty sure my uncle was either a cop or a jailer at the time, and again, their house was connected to ours by a driveway. And let me tell you too, my uncle is a big dude. He could easily pass as a member to a biker gang. He wasn't as big back then, but he was still extremely intimidating. I can't give you the events in chronological order, as they were all just jumbled in my head. But I remember my mother waking up to tapping on her window. This was odd because there was an entire shed-type area under her bedroom. It was at least 2 stories off the ground. He managed to climb our tree and jump onto her AC unit that was in the window and watch her from it. I don't know what happened after that specific incident. Either right before this or right after this, my mom was in the post office grabbing her mail. A random man had approached her and said, "Do you know who I am?" And she was confused. It had to have been before the major stuff had started happening, because my mom is incredibly intelligent and she would have easily put 2 and 2 together. She looked at him briefly and said, "No, should I?" She went to turn around and leave and he said, "Well, you will. You shouldn't have represented my wife." And by the time that she turned around to get a good look at the man or ask him what he had meant, he was gone. She was pretty shaken up, and I'm not sure what activity specifically took place after this point, or maybe a few days later. I'm working strictly off my memory and my mom's. It has been 20 years, so some things are easily forgotten. I don't know that there had been a time where he was at the front door and Mom snuck us up to my aunt's through the back door. He thought that we were still inside, and if he hadn't, he wouldn't have caught up to us before we made it to my aunt's because of the layout of our house. I was terrified though, so scared that he was going to jump out of the trees and kill us. A couple of nights later, however, I will always remember, we had drove my dad to work, and once we got there, my dad had climbed in the very back and laid down. Fred had ended up dispatching with my dad's number and signing in as my dad. And dispatch was in on the plan, and everybody knew that he had a police scanner. Nothing eventful happened until late that night. My cousin Danielle had spent the night with me. I was no longer allowed to sleep in my room. I had to sleep in the living room. Now, the door to my room was open, and the sliding glass door was locked up, obviously. There was a small walkway that we made between our wrap-around couch and our wall, but once you entered that door, you were in the living room. So anyways, we were watching Annabelle's Wish, and sometime I fell asleep. But I woke up to the tapping, and I frantically woke up Danny. We peeked over the back of the couch, and sure as it, there he was. It looked like he was tapping on the glass with a rifle, but at this point, I was young and didn't get a good look at it, so it could have been just a big stick. We panicked and speed crawled to my dad's room. We didn't want him to know that we saw him because we wanted my dad to catch him. Dad jumped out of his bed in his boxer briefs, threw his vest on, and grabbed his gun. My mom signaled for my uncle and Fred, and they were here in a matter of seconds. I don't know how she did that because up there, none of us had a cell reception, so maybe she used a house phone. We could see Fred, Dad, and my uncle frantically looking for him. My mom spotted him standing by the tree, and my uncle was only a few feet from him. He saw my uncle, but my uncle didn't see him. My mom tried signaling to my uncle, but by the time he saw my mom, the man had ran for the boat dock. And after this night, it all just stopped. He disappeared and we never saw him again, at least to our knowledge. I don't know if my mom would have recognized him or not if we had passed him in the store. It's still a very unsettling thought.